Welcome to The Torch, a podcast by the Riverside County Office of Education.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dominique Samaro, the Administrator of Community Engagement and Partnerships at the Riverside County Office of Education. Here on The Torch, our goal is to highlight the issues our families and educators are talking about and explore them with education thought leaders. Community schools is a topic of conversation in the education world, and recently, the number of schools in Riverside County that are receiving grant funding to utilize this model of education has more than tripled. That's where our guest comes in. I am very excited to be joined by Amanda Wade, coordinator of the Community Schools Partnership for the Riverside County Office of Education. I've been very fortunate to work closely with Amanda in her Community Schools Partnership role, so I am really excited to have her as a guest on The Torch. Amanda, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so glad that you're here. And, as I've gotten to work with you, I've really gotten to know about your journey. And so can you share, though, with our audience, tell us a little bit about how you got to this place?
So I started in education about 16 years ago. I started as a teacher of English at a high school level, and then I became an administrator. Most recently, I was an administrator for a continuation high school, and that's really where I started to understand the responsibility of small communities and the way that small communities really help to support their students. And so continuation education and their students are really where my heart is, and so when this position opened up to be a coordinator for the Community Schools Partnership Program, I really jumped at the chance to be able to serve my community in that way because I am a resident of Riverside County.
And so with that, I mentioned your passion. You can really feel that, and you can feel that background that you're bringing into it. You obviously are very well versed at what we mean when we say community schools. I've learned so much from you, and I've been very fortunate to actually see on the ground the things that are happening and how this model can change the trajectory for our students and our families. But that being said, there are a lot of definitions. When you hear community schools, I know you've been faced with that challenge actually. So let's kind of level that playing field for the rest of the show. What do we mean? What do you mean when you're talking about our Community Schools Partnership?
So community schools are not alternative education settings or community day schools. Community schools, as they're known across the nation, are K-12 or PK-12 public schools that serve their students in a variety of ways, from integrated student supports to family engagement, community engagement, and collaborative leadership. So it's a framework for thinking about how schools can serve their community and not the type of school as in a community day or alternative setting.
And so, how did that background evolve? Obviously we have always felt, particularly those of us working in education, that schools are the heart of a community, right? And when we're talking about this community schools model, this national model that we're really expanding here in Riverside County, what is the goal when we say a community school? What does that translate to for our students and our families?
So it really means that schools are the hub of their community, the center of their community where the families and community members and students from that school can go to get the types of resources and support that they need. So that could be mental health care, dental care, eye care. It could be basic needs. It could also mean extended learning opportunities. So before, after school care, summer internship, externship programs. It's a variety of resources, and it's a variety of things that each community needs. So each community school is really focused on what their community needs and bringing those resources to that hub so that communities go to their school for those needs.
And, we talked about it's a pretty amazing and impressive expansion right here in Riverside County. We talked about the number of schools who will be part of this community school model is more than tripled just within the last few years. So how did that happen? How did this come about so rapidly?
Yeah, so in 2021, the state legislature put into effect and signed the California Community Schools Partnership Act. And so that opened up a grant process for our schools in this state. And in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. We were all thinking about some other things, but there were a few districts that were looking at this as a way of, really servicing their students. And so we had a district here in 2021 that did do that, and that was Jurupa Unified. And after learning more about that, I think word of mouth, people understood that this grant opportunity was going to be really essential for propping up our schools for the future. And so more grant cohorts or rounds of grant applications were offered. And so now we have 59 schools within 7 districts that have that grant funding for 5 years. And so that grant goes through 2031.
Wow, that's impressive. And so that's 59 schools right here in Riverside County. It's amazing. And so what is your role then is it to support their efforts and this work?
Yes, yeah. The role of the Community Schools Partnership is a technical assistance role, but really it's to support in any way that our schools really do need support in terms of resources, outsourcing resources, connecting to resources that might be within their community that they haven't connected with already to support their students, depending on what the community has said in their needs assessment that they need.
And so with that, you talked about this great expansion, the role you're going to be playing in supporting all of these schools, bringing this model on board. I'm assuming there's a lot of research and background that says this is a successful model, because we're putting a lot into this, right, at the state level, right here at Riverside County Office of Education. We always want to be at the forefront, so we're dedicating a lot to this. Tell us why they're thinking that this is going to be the thing that's going to really help our students.
Right, and you're right. It is one of the state superintendent's 8 initiatives. In fact, it's listed as the top one when you go to the website and you look at their state initiatives. It's community schools, because it's been proven that if you can collaborate with your community and understand what your community needs and get their input on what they need, then you're better able to resource what solutions can be provided for those needs. And so in collaborating more often, more frequently, and in more depth with your community, you're able to serve the students for specifically what they need that are barriers to learning. So when you can address what the barrier is first, then a child can learn more quickly, more independently, more successfully in the classroom.
I love that. Something being from the community engagement side of things, we always say let's go to them, right? Oftentimes we put out programs and we put out, opportunities, if you will, with the best of intentions. But if they can't meet us there, then we're doing it for naught, right? And so it really feels like this is saying, let's bring everything and create this hub and address their needs and put the focus all on our students and our families. It's really amazing. And can you tell me then, kind of what would be like the pillars of this type of program?
So the California Community Schools Partnership Program has established 4 pillars within their framework, and they mirror some of the national pillars as well. And so those are community engagement, community and family engagement. Those are integrated student supports, collaborative leadership, and extended learning opportunities.
And so are those some of the things that you're trying to work with our schools so they can really establish those 4 pillars as the basis for their programs?
Yes. So the 4 pillars are really based within equity. Were created because the approach that those 4 pillars have creates an equitable learning environment and equitable community.
In here at the Riverside County Office of Education, one of our 4 initiatives by our superintendent, Dr. Edwin Gomez, is equity and inclusive practices. So I feel like, this is really working comprehensively for us as a region.
Right, and so in focusing on those 4 pillars, along with the other pieces of the framework, if you're focusing on those 4 pillars, you're really fulfilling the obligation of not only the grant, but the vision of community schools.
That's really great. Can you give me some examples? One of the things I often tell our guests is we have so many families, just general community members, engaged residents listening in, but we also have a lot of educators who watch the show. And so talk to them, how can they really be a part of creating that community school feel at their sites, whether they're a teacher or they're at the administrative level?
I think it's really aligning and identifying what your students need within your classroom, within your school, and working to provide those resources with school site leadership. So if we're identifying that students are in need of, basic needs resources like food, clothing, wash facilities, then those are things that we can provide using the Community Schools Partnership funding, because that's what it's intended for, so that we can establish resources that meet those needs and break down those barriers so that students can be able to learn in class. So for educators, I would say that if you're within a community school, it's continually working with school site leadership and your community liaison to understand what the needs of your community are and work to meet those needs.
I love that. This past year, obviously the Riverside County Office of Education, even in our programs, some of them have kind of shifted to a different way of thinking, where maybe we would have typically held one large event, and brought people in maybe right here to our incredible facility, which we're so proud and honored to have. But you are then asking residents from throughout the county to travel, a distance for some of them, maybe engage with people that they don't already have a relationship with. And so instead, we actually brought some of those programs, as to school sites. And so, tell me, is that a little bit of an example of what we're trying to see, where we say, no, just build and foster that bond right there at the school?
Yeah, because we understand that the barrier could be transportation, or the barrier could be a language barrier, or a socioeconomic barrier, right? And if we're putting a resource 100 miles away from somebody, they're not easily able to access that resource. And so really, you're right. The goal is to bring it as close to home as possible. And if it's a neighborhood school, that's most likely as close as possible.
Yeah, and I think also just what a beautiful way to strengthen those relationships and the trust between the families and the educators, right?
Right. And that's really the goal, is to help to build trust between families and education, because there's a variety of viewpoints, from the community. And if we can establish that we are here to provide the resources that they need, and that they know that they can come to us when they need something, then we continue to build that trust and that relationship.
I love that. Such a beautiful concept. It's almost simple when you think about it, it's almost like, wait, why haven't we been doing this? And I'm sure we've been doing this in a lot of ways, right? But so does it excite you that you're in this role to kind of comprehensively look at it and support our schools?
Yeah, because you're right. We're doing so many things. Our schools, our districts are doing so many things. But now we're pulling all of those things together in a cohesive, coherent way so that we understand what the other departments are doing, and we're really working to make sure that one is what we're doing serving our community and meeting the need, right? And two, are there other things that we could be doing, right? But you're right, we are doing so much already. It's really trying to concentrate and focus on what our families and our communities need.
I like that, really creating that focus and that efficiency, because ultimately that's what's going to lead to the effective system, right? So, I touched on this briefly earlier. You know this as well as I, but the Riverside County Office of Education, we always want to be innovative. We want to be at the forefront, and we are constantly partnering with others. We want to strengthen not just our agency, not just our 23 districts, all of this, the other programs that we serve, but we look at this as a state, as a national goal, right? It's a mission to serve our students. And so what are we doing with this? It's a little bit maybe more on a regional level.
Yeah, so Riverside County Office of Education is in partnership with our surrounding counties to make sure that we are all kind of on the same page in where we're heading with this grant process and with the support that we're providing. So throughout the Inland Empire, as well as in Inyo and Mono County, we partner with San Bernardino, and they are the lead on the California Community Schools Partnership Grant. And so we're really working together in partnership to make sure that the resources that we're providing our families and our communities are really aligned, and that we can go to them if we need support. We can go to other counties to understand maybe what the needs are in their county and see how they might be similar and how we might partner with them to support each other.
You know, one resource that I am super excited about in terms of particularly going out into the community in the role that we have and saying, hey, we can share this with you, is the website resource, right, and that plugin. Can you share more about that and how really anyone in Riverside County can go right now to our website to get some pretty neat resources?
Yes, so we have partnered with Find Help to offer resources for anybody who would like to use the resource. So you can go to our website, so www.rcoe.us/CCSPP. So you will go to that website and you would be able to not only see our Find Help search box, but you are able to see all of the community schools within our county, within a directory, and access Find Help as well. So within Find Help, you are able to access any type of resource that you really could think of, from job or career resources to basic needs resources, healthcare resources, mental health care resources, and it's really based on what zip code you live in. It's very accurate as to what kind of resources are available within your local area. Again, bringing it to the closest available and closest to you.
And this is totally free for our users, right? For our residents, the people who are going to go online and access that. And I think something that, I found very helpful and impactful about this resource is that it's constantly being updated, right? I know all of us, we've got our databases and our spreadsheets, and we're trying to keep everything up to date, but it's difficult, and so this is just updating for us, right?
Yes, Find Help frequently updates their resources, weekly, on a weekly basis. You can go in and look at a resource and see on their site when it was last updated. So that means that somebody is checking their website, checking their phone number to make sure that it's a viable resource, that they're not putting something out there that isn't going to work for the public.
It's a small example, but I think that it speaks to the nature of this whole model, which is, sometimes just placing those calls for service, right? When you're raising a family, working a job or multiple jobs, dealing with everything that is going on in life, placing one call and then it doesn't go through, and then needing to call 3 other places. And, those kind of things could lead somebody to say, I wasn't able to get that resource, right? And so even something like this, we're just breaking down that barrier, like you mentioned.
Right. And we're all very busy, you're right. And even one phone call sometimes isn't even possible. And so the great thing about Find Help is there's also a platform or way to communicate with some of the providers that is completely electronic. So you're sending in a referral form or submitting some sort of form that says that you're interested in their service, or you're sent to a website where you can access an email and email them instead. So it's not always needed to make a phone call in order to access the service.
I love that. What excites you most about this work?
In community schools in general?
You know what? Let's go with community schools, but then we can go broader. I mean, why not, right? So yeah, but within community schools, that concept.
I think that the vision is such a huge vision, right? That we can make our county, our school sites, our families, that we can make a difference and make what happens in the future better based on what we're doing now, that we have the ability to make a real impact on that.
So, we've shared a lot of information, but on a personal level, professional level, what excites you most about this work?
I think the overall vision of community schools is such a grand vision. And I feel like with all of the types of support that we're offering our families and our communities, that it's an attainable vision. Even if it is a grand vision, that we have the ability to make a real impact in our families and in our communities and in our students' success in the future, given all of the support and resources that we're providing now.
I love that. And what advice would you give to our educators, the ones out there, they're working on this, maybe they're in one of those 59 community schools and they're told, okay, here's one more project, there's one more vision, there's one more goal, because there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. What would you tell them about, hey, it's going to be okay. I know you're here to support them all, which is wonderful, but, what would you say to them?
It could easily be seen as one more thing, but it truly is something that frames all of the things that are currently being done. And to think of it in that way, to think of it as a frame with where everything that you're doing falls into that frame is really, I think, the most helpful. I think one piece of advice that I would continue to give educators and practitioners that are using this framework is continue to listen to your community. Don't double up on the work that you're doing or go outside of what's actually needed. Continue to listen with empathy to what is needed so that you're doing the most that you can in the most efficient way that you can.
I love that. Listening is always going to be the secret to success, right? And let's always make sure that we're bringing them what they truly need, right? So as we begin to close, I want to thank you for the beautiful vision and really kind of also just breaking down, because we have our own barriers to things with naming and kind of so many projects and programs, but you just gave a beautiful synopsis of what it means to say community schools and what is that going to do for our students and families, right? But before we leave, we'd love to have a little bit of fun, with you on a more personal level. So we're going to go into our fire round, and we're going to ask you 3 questions, 2 of which we ask every guest. And the third one is unique to you. So the goal is to answer this in 1 word or 1 sentence. I am not sure any of our guests have ever done that. So I want to just bring the pressure right on down, But so for the first one, what teacher or educator had the most impact in your life?
Well, when I think about, because I'm already thinking about community schools, when I think about when I was younger, I would say my 4th grade teacher, when I was going through a hard time in my family, my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Bowman, was really kind to me really often and understood that maybe some of my my struggles in class or my behavior in class didn't have anything to do with her, but really what was happening, within my life and within myself. And so she was always very kind to me and very patient, and she kind of showed me what it meant to be a good teacher and a good educator for when I was a teacher myself.
That's so beautiful, and it really speaks to one of your last points about community schools, which is just listening. If we're there and connecting with our students, we can bring them the resources that you needed at the time, right? So that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So question number 2, what is a favorite book? It doesn't have to be the favorite book, because I'm sure as educators we have many, but what is a favorite book of yours?
I think something, again, because I'm thinking about community schools already, The Art of Active Allyship by Purnima Luthra, she's out of Copenhagen Business School.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll make sure. I bet everyone's going to
She also has an article in Harvard Business Review from November 2022. It's kind of a short version of that book.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that as a resource for everybody listening. And the final one just for you. If you could just, dream it, think outside of the box, you mostly won't get any trouble for this, but what one resource would you bring to community schools that maybe they don't have right now?
I think it would be maybe not necessarily a tangible resource, but a lens for schools to understand that the community schools that they have and the work that they do now And the early interventions that they do could possibly keep our students out of the juvenile justice system. And that the work that they're doing within schools, particularly elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, that the work that they're doing could have a real impact on whether or not a student, particularly a student of color, ends up in the juvenile justice system, whether that be incarceration or simply an interaction with the system. There is a real possibility that this could impact that future for them.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that inspiration. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for being a fabulous colleague here at RCOE. You can really feel your passion and your purpose, and we're so fortunate to have you leading our Community Schools Partnership. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening in. The Torch is a monthly series from the Riverside County Office of Education, so make sure to follow us on your favorite streaming platform, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. We're honored to share these important discussions so we can all support our families, teachers, and everyone passionate about delivering the very best for our students.